Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special edition, perhaps the Wally Pip edition of the KMS Rundown. Um, some people take weeks off. I feel like the fans need the content. The rundown must go on. So here we are. I am joined tonight by, of course, Little People, Big World guy. Say hello to the people.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for
And
having me.
of course, it's a pleasure to have you. And living legend in the top right corner here, Blind Owl, has joined us. And I must say, East Coast, West Coast time zone thing. I got caught up at work. We're recording pretty late on the East Coast here. Blind Owl's been up since 4 a.m. He's an absolute warrior for making this work. So, how you doing, Blind Owl?
We're doing good. I've only fallen asleep twice waiting for this to start.
Okay, so we won't waste anybody's time here. We'll get it ripping. Thought it's been a pretty good week of shows. Good amount of stuff to talk to. It feels like a long time ago, but on Monday, we kind of opened up with the Cullen stuff, the assisted suicide story. It's been a while since Cullen has popped his head up. Like, I feel like it's been years, maybe. He's been laying pretty low. This kind of reminded me of, I feel like when the podcast originally started, Kirk and Steve, like, this is kind of what the KMS was. Like, it's kind of evolved into this wacky world universe type thing. But I think early on, the intention was kind of be like a little media watchdog podcast. We're going to call people out, fuck the globe. So it's kind of like nostalgic to kind of get a little taste of that again. I'll go to you first, Blind Owl. I know you're an avid harasser of the Boston Globe. You're kind of the watchdog on Twitter. What did you think about this story?
Well, I mean, like you said, this had Kirk and Callahan written all over it. Obviously, back in 2017, Kevin Cullen lied about the Boston Globe and all that stuff. But you knew once this story came out, Kirk was going to be all over it. And I mean, it wasn't. It even now, it isn't like it was when the show started. He wasn't even all over it for too long. I mean, they did half the show on it, and that was it. I mean, you can't dwell on it too long. Globe's dumb. The guy tried to assist someone's suicide, being involved in the story. It's dumb, but you gotta, like you said, it's kind of more. The show's morphed into more of a goofy style of show, and it's always good to get those throwbacks. Guys like Sneakers and all those old guys. Oh, they never fight with anybody anymore. That I think this was meat on the bone for them.
Yeah, I'll go to you, Little People, Big World guy. What was your thoughts on the whole Cullen thing? Does it feel like a dead horse? It got me a little interested. It's kind of a weird story. If you it kind of feels like you just pick two random words. It's like Kevin Cullen assisted suicide. Like, you never know what this guy's gonna pop up with. It feels like, what are those things where you fill the word in? You write Mad Libs. Yeah, it feels like a Mad Lib. Give it to me, Little People, Big World guy.
Yeah, so I don't think it's like beating a dead horse, but it's almost like it's a fight not worth having because there's no fight back on the other side. They're just hiding, and there's nothing going on the other side. Nothing will happen with the Globe. Obviously, it's crazy. I can remember people here in Philly with the Inquirer having headlines that are maybe too far one way and getting fired for that, and then this guy with a repeated history of just lying or being too involved in his stories, just continually getting away with it. So I don't think it's beating the dead horse, but it's a fight that's already been won, and now
it's almost like you don't want him to get fired because it's just a gift that keeps on giving. Like, every now and then, it's less frequent now, but it's like every couple of years, this guy's just he can't stay out of his own way, and he's just gonna do something stupid.
Yeah, what's he gonna do in 2 years? What's next? What crazy thing is he gonna get him?
Let's give a prediction. What is Kevin Cullen gonna pop up next with Blind Owl?
I think it's gonna be something political up in Vermont. I don't know, some law is gonna come up, and he's gonna be saying he was on the state floor, state Congress, lobbying for something, and then it's gonna come out that they didn't even meet at that time or something, and he's just going to make something totally bogus up. And the Globe said they're going to check everything even harder now that he already made the mistake. But Kirk's already caught him twice. He lied about the barbershop. They didn't know who he was, and now he's getting himself involved in this crap. So who knows? Who knows what he'll be up to?
What's your guess, little people, big world guy?
If I'm Kevin Cullen, I go to Maine and I break the triad weed story wide open. Get it into the Boston Globe.
Turns out he's behind it all.
Yeah.
He's a Chinese operative. Okay, let's even take a little step back. So I want to get, I mean, we've in my notes here, I wanted to get your guys' take on this KMS rundown strike gate, but it turns out it was just a bit. I did have some prepared jokes that I want to get off. I had a couple, so I couldn't pick one, so I'm just going to go through all of them. People are saying that Ziggy is in rehab because he's addicted to bits. That's one. I got another one here that says they're taking a week off because Ziggy threw his back out carrying that show. People are calling it the KMS clout down. People are saying this is the real KMS rundown. I have another one. It's kind of a verbal meme. It's Ohio's Tate and Ziggy, and then the handshake thing and not showing your face. And then I have, what do Ziggy and Joel Embiid have in common? They both need load management. So I had to get those off. I couldn't settle on just one. So I'm just gonna get them all off there.
Word on the street is Red's getting breast reduction surgery. So.
There we go. I like that. All right. I want your guys' rating on Menners as a network CEO. Do you consume a lot of the network content? I'm a big Menners guy. I think he's doing a great job with the network. As I was explaining to Blind Owl before we hopped on here, I've been very busy with work, and the 4 days a week, it's enough. It's a hard thing for me to keep up with the show. So my network stuff has gone down a little bit. In an ideal world, I like to watch everything. But give me just your overall feelings. I'll start with you, little people, big world guy, on the network. Are you into it? Are you not into it? You're anti-Menners? You like Menners?
Menners, the character, I hate. Menners, the CEO, I think I like, which is weird to say. I've been way more into the network listening to stuff than I ever have been before. As of probably the last 2 or 3 months, I've been really into it. So, and for all the shit he gets, I actually think he's been doing a good job. So it hurts me to say that deep down inside. I would love to just rip him, but I actually think he's been doing pretty good.
Amen. What about you, Blake?
I actually think he's, when I first started listening to Network and everything, I thought he was more serious than he is. It's listening to a perfect example was the Steve from Gloucester battle last night, or I listened to it this morning, and that Steve is a guy who wasn't in on the joke, and Menners was totally in on the joke, and so and like I said, the character is funny. It's like little people, big world guy said, the character is funny, but I mean, the strike and all that, it's just other people doing bits. I mean, Menners will get himself involved in bits and all that.
Yeah, he's been known to do a bit or two, that's for sure.
Definitely. Some other bit will come up and he'll do it and he'll mock others. And I mean, like the bit of hating people just because they don't go on the show. Like that's come on. He's just doing it, and some people just don't get it.
Since I haven't spoken to you gentlemen in a little while, I wanted to get your feel of the Coleman era. I've kind of been back and forth. At first, I really didn't like him, but that's just because I wanted Montante to get the job. Then he kind of grew on me. Then he faded a little bit, but I think I'm in on Coleman. He doesn't take – I don't know if there's anything that's going to break him. Like the gay jokes, he's leaning into it. The rich kid jokes, he leans into it. He's just kind of goofy, especially this week. He was very giggly this week. But I want to just – yeah.
Very giggly.
Some accusations about maybe some drug use. I don't know. But I want to get your guys' take on Coleman era. How many months are we in now? We're like 5 months in.
4 or 5.
Yeah. So how are you feeling about the Coleman era, and how do you feel about the Justin introduction into the Coleman era? I feel like the Justin introduction has helped Coleman. I liked Gus. He faded on me. He just wasn't right for the job. The show is definitely better with Justin.
Mm-hmm. I was a Gus guy right off the bat. Always will be a Gus guy. But Yeah, like you said, Coleman, he's was very goofy and really kind of had some good one-liners here and there. My big takeaway from this week was just how young and stupid he is. I mean, just the thinking Punxsutawney Phil was 100 and some odd years old. I'm like, it's freaking groundhog. What are we doing here? And then little things like that, and just those little comments. Trying to think of another good example, but just how he just doesn't pick up on certain things. And is it because he's young? I don't know. Is it? I don't know. But he's been good. He's been good. And the Justin edition is just I think it's just a better dynamic because Coleman knows he doesn't have to be. He's not fully in charge. Justin can do things and will take the bits. But we saw this little bit of the sensitivity when Gus brought up his old podcast. But we haven't seen that since. So
that did seem to be the one thing that kind of really phased him. But yeah, other than that, I feel like he kind of takes everything on the chin. I want you both to give a grade out of 100 so far. KMS 3.0/3.5, the Coleman era out of 100. What are you giving it, Blind Owl?
I'm giving it an 82.
Okay, that's fair.
I feel like I got to go higher. Kirk's just gonna hate me more and keep me blocked. Yeah. So I'm gonna say an 86.
Yeah, no list jokes tonight. No list jokes tonight.
No.
86. Yeah, if I had to give one, I would say, just because it feels like right now the show is so sustainable, I'm gonna give it an 88. I'm gonna go a little bit. I'm actually, show's better than it's ever been. I feel like on the rundown you have to say that, but I'm gonna give it an 88. Solid grade. It doesn't ever really feel like they're grasping for topics recently. I wanted to get your guys' take too on the kind of reduction of calls. I think it has helped the show a lot. I think calls are fun every now and then, but I think it should kind of be an every now and then thing. What Little People Big World guy, what's your take on kind of phasing calls or having calls be more of a special occasion type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm a caller. That's how anyone knows me is from my calling, and probably hate it for it. So, but I agree. I think this week, no calls. The show really didn't miss a beat. There was really nothing lacking there. So, and I think it's good. There was different voices in there that we heard that weren't just the same people. So I just think it was good. It's not a different show. Obviously, it's the same show, but it was just a new spin on it. Nothing forced, nothing awkward with Dan from Newton calling in every day with whatever he's going to talk about. I think it works. It's good. It just shows Kirk doesn't need it. Obviously, he makes it work, but it's not necessary.
What do we think Dan from Newton's doing? Like, you think he's having, like, you think his marriage has fallen apart? Like, those calls are like the backbone of his existence, I feel like.
Like 10:45 has to roll around, and he's like, where the fuck is the tweet? Like, where is the tweet?
You have to think he's calling somebody else doing the bit, and what it is life is just like, what are you doing, buddy?
Well, he does branch out at least and make prank calls with it, so hopefully we'll get some good ones there, but it's got to be frustrating.
I was listening to a old show. I was actually listening because I was going to go on Quantum Kirk until David canceled on me 5 minutes before, but no big deal. I was listening to the show with Jonathan Soroff. You remember that guy?
Oh, yeah.
When he came, it's a good episode, but in that episode, Dan from Newton calls, but like gives his real name, and it's like not him doing the bit, and he asks some question about like WEEI or something, and I was like, oh shit, that guy's been calling forever. But yeah.
That's actually my favorite part of like listening back is hearing someone like the first time. You're like, oh, because I remember my first call when I called him, and it was absolutely atrocious. I was one of them assholes who had Kirk bless my kid and all, and I'm like, man, I regret that.
But those are the best. Everyone loves those ones.
Yeah.
Any golf course recommendation calls from you,
I was going to say book recommendations. I've called a few times with a few duds myself, but I've given up on that. But yeah, the no calls has been kind of nice actually, because it's just like a flowing show. I mean, the calls are always good. I like them, but it just things have kind of flowed more natural.
And with listening live with it, it doesn't feel like you can tell like the show's wrapping up at any point. Then like something could happen, and then like on Monday, the show could just keep going at that point. Where it's not like, all right, we've hit the end of the calls. we're pretty much done now at this point.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's kind of like when calls start, it's like, okay, like the 40-minute or the hour countdown kind of starts, and then you're kind of just waiting for the couple more.
Yeah.
I do like this, how, yeah, sometimes it feels like a show might be winding down, and I'm not a live listener. I listen later in the day, so I'll be like, oh, the show's kind of winding down, and you'll look at the thing, you'll be like, oh no, I got like 45 more minutes. Like something comes up, and then they just keep going. So I do kind of like the freedom it gives to the show in that regard. Okay, moving on. KMS going on tour. Do we think this cross-country trip is happening? Do we think Mike is going? Thoughts about Gus going? I'll start with you, Blind Owl.
This topic has come up 3 or 4 times in show history. Remember Minifans Across America?
And it's never happened. So that's why I'm like, is this going to be the one that finally happens?
I think this one has a little bit more potential because there's stops along the way to do things. Like Kirk was talking about today, he's going to stop at where Sheldon want to have his show, and at some moose lodge in Hicktown, North Dakota. And there's more substance to it, it seems, than the last time. They're not really making it from scratch. And Kirk said he's taking it over fully, which is because Justin's butchery of it last time was epic, to say the least.
I actually have a fun fact about that. Did you guys know that Kirk almost went to Sheldon's wedding? He never mentioned that, but he actually almost went.
I believe he said it today on the show.
I know, he says it all the time.
Yeah.
All right, Little People, Big World guy. What do you think about the tour? Like, I don't know, 2 weeks in a car. It seems like a lot of driving for the amount of time they're budgeting out. It definitely sounds like Blind Mike's worst nightmare. It reminds me, if you remember, I think it was intern Will and Latino Kirk driving to Key West, and they tried to make Mike go, and he's just like, and he ended up not going, and the fan base turned on him. It was actually a bad moment.
He couldn't miss his girlfriend's friend's beach birthday, is what that was.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. But yeah, I hear a lot of reservation in Mike's voice when they're talking about it. Maybe Mike shouldn't have to go the whole time. That's a lot. I mean, Blind Owl, maybe you can comment on this, but a cross-country road trip you're in a car for 2 weeks as a guy and he's more visually impaired than you. It's just a lot. It's like way out of his comfort zone.
It's a lot of sitting and not knowing where you are, and there's nothing worse than getting to a restaurant and not being able to find the bathroom. It's like, ugh. And not everything is on somebody else's schedule, whereas when you're home you can do your own thing. Oh, it's such a pain.
Yeah, I think they should have Mike go for like 3 days of it and then fly him home, or have someone get him home. But we don't need to make Mike suffer that whole thing. I do like the idea of adding Gus to it. He's a little bit of a wild card. He's worried about, he needs a heads up if he's going over any borders. What did you guys initially think when he was like, Canada, can't go into Canada? Because the thing that comes to my mind is like, oh, if you've ever had a DUI, you can't go to Canada. So I was like, what kind of charges does Gus have on his record that he's worried about the Canadian border?
I know exactly what he's talking about right away, because like he lives in I was in Delaware. I walked out of my car, and the very first thing I walked to is Gus smoking a blunt in the parking lot of the subway. Like I knew exactly what Gus was getting at.
I can't. When I first spoke to Gus, I didn't get that vibe at all. Then he's taking 500 milligrams and is perfectly fine. I'm like, this is a problem.
Yeah, I would have never had him pegged as like a hardcore stoner. I just wouldn't. But once it kind of makes sense. But it definitely wasn't my first reaction. I think they need to, and I think they've talked about this, they need to rent Steve's van. They need to put the ragtag crew of Gus, Coleman, and Justin in Big Steve's camper. They can kind of camp it out. They don't need hotels. They can sleep in the van. But I'm curious to see if it happens. I kind of hope it does. Maybe if they're out on the West Coast. I mean, Washington's not really that close to me, but Kirk has promised a Los Angeles or West Coast show twice and not delivered on that promise. So if he goes to Washington, maybe I'll have to make the trip.
I was going to say, not to say it's owed, but they were all for like Black Friday and stuff like that, where these trips came from, right? So not saying Kirk's going to 100% hold up his end of the bargain, but I think in this instance, I think he's going to do it.
I think it would. I mean, it would be the first time he's ever held up one of those raffles, maybe, other than the VFW. The golden ticket, I don't think he held that one up. There was another one. So he has a dodgy history with this stuff, which is why my red flags go up. But he does seem interested in the road trip. So I actually think it happens in some capacity.
He's on the ball lately. Papagino's, Subway, they were all involved. I'm putting faith in Kirk.
Something will happen. Will it be exactly what it is? But no, I don't think so. But something will happen.
Will he find a way to push it back? Sure. But I mean, that's what any smart man would do.
Easy now. We're trying to get you unblocked, not double blocked. Okay, moving on to the Barstool Radio saga / Kirk's new podcast. I have desperately been trying to find the clip because either in 2019 or 2020, and this is hardly an original take, but I was like, you know what? I remember having this take on air that when Kirk retires, I think it would be awesome if him and Portnoy and Whitney did a show, even if it was like once a month, just because they're dynamic. They ball bust each other. It's perfect having three people because they team up on each other. Then it switches. They're trashing each other behind each other's backs. I'm curious to see if it kind of has the same impact that Dave Portnoy show used to have, where like everyone would have their fucking buttholes clenched, like worried about getting called onto that show. I think it probably ends up being a little bit goofier than the Portnoy show, which was kind of serious when it came to drama. But I'll start with you, Little People Big World guy. Are you excited for this new podcast? Are we worried it might take away from KMS? Give me your thoughts.
I definitely don't think it's going to take anything away from KMS. If honestly, it'll probably just bring him more into the Barstool orbit, obviously, and get more involved. And that, I don't necessarily think it'll be like the drama. What there is definitely going to come up. There's people in Portnoy's camp that are going to make sure whoever needs to know what's going on is going to know. Kirk's going to, like, Gaz will let Kirk know. Whitney will find out. Like, nothing. I don't think any stone's going to get unturned with these three. And they're all going to hold each other accountable. They're all going to hold each other accountable too. They're not going to take it easy on any of them. So
I wouldn't be surprised if you see some preemptive people starting to be like, just throw out some like, oh, I actually like Kirk, like kind of like Tommy Smokes did a few weeks ago, like, oh yeah, I'm actually a Minifan, or like people are gonna make their like try to get on the right side of that because you don't want to be on the wrong side of that in that format. So I wouldn't be shocked if it's like some people kind of make that play to try to get in the good graces, try to kiss the ring, which Kirk loves.
Next Monday, a few show tweets come out from random Barstool people. It'll be like, okay, I see what you're doing here. I see it.
The main accounts tweeting the show so much more is telling too. It's almost like they knew. Yeah, they knew something. Not necessarily knew like radio was ending and a new show was coming, but they knew like, all right, we need to get Kirk involved. So
yeah,
it's funny. It happened literally in Delaware. He said, "Oh, it's funny they haven't tweeted the Belichick thing," and then the next day they tweeted the Belichick thing.
yeah.
I think could you have telegraphed that anymore?
That's a benefit of Coleman knowing those behind the scenes guys, right? Like he has actual relationships with them. Like I'm sure Cullinane conversed with them in some regard, but Coleman, like they know him face to face. So I think it just gets a little more attention on that. And I think Kirk had a take where he was like, oh, he said this new show won't hurt his audience, which I agree with. But he's like, I don't know if I'll get a ton of new fans. I actually disagree with that pretty heavily. I think a lot of the Barstool people are going to hear him going after people, and they're going to kind of be reminded of the old Barstool. And I actually do think we will get an influx of new people kind of coming into the world, which will be interesting. It's like there's so much show history now that, and it reminds me of the guy, I think Bob, who was in studio, who's just been listening for a few months. It's like trying to like get into this world now. It's not harder than ever. It's very accessible, but there's no way anyone can go back. I mean, even the producer of the show doesn't know the show history. It's just so much, and it's so inside, and there's so many characters. But it will kind of be fun to have a new, fresh influx of Minifans.
You can get through 3 old shows in a day. I'm just saying. If Coleman really wanted to, he could be. You can get through.
If you work a desk job and you're just like someone who's listening to podcasts all day, it's going to be the greatest gift that ever happened to you, because there's so many hours of good shows, so much ridiculous stuff. And it's kind of fun to like listen to the new stuff, and then in the meantime you kind of go back, but just make it a little hard. I think people are less likely to do that when there is 4 shows a week. Like
Yeah.
if we calculated the amount of hours of shows this week, it's like almost 20 hours. It's like basically a part-time job. So there's so much content these days that I'm curious. People probably don't even feel the need to go back. I mean, I'm sure there's some true psychos that will, but I agree that Coleman probably should be a little further in his download of the show than he is.
Yeah, he's got a. Well, he claims he had to go. He started remember because Apple only had a certain number, and then he had to go all the way back. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if that's true. He's had a few long drives from New Jersey. That's a couple of shows right there, and he doesn't seem to be making much progress. But as Kirk says, sometimes it's easier just to dive in and pick it up as you go along.
Sometimes when you listen to those old shows, like the mics and everything sound so much like
I have
less
nothing to say.
professional. I'm a Steve guy, but the sound just wasn't as good back in the day. I don't know if it's because technology is better or what, but it sounds like when you
The
listen to
Red
old
13
shows now,
days, it sounded like they were recording in a bathroom somewhere.
it sounds like this probably sounds. It sounds just like a network show, honestly.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right, moving on here. Chris Klemmer's new show. Did anybody watch it? I kind of watched 10 minutes of it, and before I had to turn it off. It was fine for me. I think it's cool that he's trying to make his own footing. I've gone back and forth on Klemmer. Overall, I think he's a pretty nice guy. Did either of you watch the Rat Race?
I put it on. I think it was more visual, so I didn't really understand what was going on. So I just I left it on so we got the view, but didn't really do it for me.
I think we all kind of felt that way. It was like, I'll tune in for a little bit, but it didn't really grab me. But sounds like it went well for him, and he got maybe another episode of it. So good for Klemmer. Good for Klemmer. Any thoughts, Little People, Big World guy?
Nah, I mean, I'm not the biggest Klemmer guy, so I wouldn't have watched it if I was, to be honest. That just doesn't interest me at this point.
Yeah, it kind of felt like a dollar store version of Surviving Barstool, just the energy of it. But I did like the clips that came out of it of him like taking the hosting role like way too seriously. Like those definitely made me laugh.
They played the end with the rock paper scissors shoot thing.
that was fun.
Like, what are we doing?
Oh, okay. So did you guys think Coleman's take that the $3,000 came from Klemmer? Did you find that ridiculous? Because honestly, even before Coleman said it, I kind of thought that it was a possibility. Like if he's really trying to make a name for himself and he didn't have a sponsor, he's got the money bag rich wife. Like maybe he was just like, you know what, I'll put $3,000 of my own money into it to make the prize. I thought Coleman got too much flack for that, to be honest. But I also am a rich kid as well, so maybe it's a rich kid thing.
I mean, Coleman, he's not far enough in his re-listen to know that Chris made a lot of money in his 30s.
That's true.
So he doesn't know that.
That's true.
That's just,
and he's above Justin, but there's no way you can't think he put up the money for that. That's part of the show overhead that they have to try to sell to meet the prize money.
I guess, but if it's not sponsored, and I don't know, I guess I'm a dummy on that. I kind of side with Coleman there. It just popped into my head while we're on that. The dynamic between Coleman and Justin, I kind of find it interesting because they're very, oh yeah, kumbaya, everything is good. Justin's like, oh, I don't want to be the lead producer. But Justin kind of laid a nice little trap for Coleman earlier in this week in regards to, what was it, Live Events Lisa, was it?
Oh, yeah.
Where he kind of was like, oh yeah, I was waiting to see if Coleman said that. That's not B or co-producer behavior. That's kind of alpha dog behavior. And I think Justin can say all he wants that he doesn't want to be the lead producer, he's not an alpha, but at the end of the day, like the decision making as far as the direction of the show, Justin's opinion definitely weighs more than Coleman's. And I don't know, I kind of see in the future, we know Kirk loves pinning people against each other. So I would say in the next few months, there will be some kind of Justin Coleman war that Kirk will do everything in his power to throw gasoline on.
That was a loyalty check. And Justin is the king of loyalty. And he was just waiting to see if Coleman was either loyal to Barstool or to Kirk. And now Justin's no mastermind by any stretch, but he was just waiting on that, just waiting to see if he brought it up. And if he didn't, and then Justin was just going to say, "Oh yeah, here's this. How come you didn't bring this up?" But
yeah, I didn't think it was the best week for Justin. I'm definitely a Justin guy, but I thought that bit, the Globe bit, kind of flopped. I thought the hesitancy of him with the diaper thing, which by the way disgusts me, and like I don't want that content, but I didn't like how he kind of had some reservations about it, which we'd never really seen that much with Justin. He's usually, oh yeah, whatever it takes, whatever I need to do. Did you guys feel that too, or was I overstepping on that?
For sure, but I also think it's not the same Justin from 2 years ago, which is probably for the best for Justin. So for him to even be able to say like, no, Kirk, I don't want to do this, even though he kind of pussyfooted around it a little bit, is probably best for Justin.
Fair.
The video from the Globe, I thought it had a lot of potential, and then we find out he went at 5 p.m. I'm like, everyone leaves before that. Like, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, it said they were open till 8. I'm like, all right, Justin, whatever.
It's also a tough look to like go do the bit and then lock your keys in the car. It just makes you look like a dummy. And then
the key bit I think was the funniest part in my opinion.
It was the funniest part. It actually kind of did save it. I know Jay's Mayhem was out there trying desperately to find Justin Keys. He got no credit for it. But that dynamic of, so when it was Gus and Coleman, I feel like they kind of had their little buddy thing where it's like, oh yeah, it's us, we both can relate about like, oh yeah, sometimes Kirk is like hard on us. And I feel like they had its kind of bond where it's like, oh yeah, we're with each other, kind of working together, not against Kirk, but like if Kirk were to shit on one of them, the other one was probably like, hey man, don't worry about it so much. Whereas with Justin, Coleman has to be in the back of his mind thinking like, I can't say one bad word about Kirk or have one thing that could even be perceived as a criticism, because Justin is instantly going to take that and bring it up on air. So I wonder how Coleman kind of feels like that. Do you kind of agree with me about that dynamic?
I think it's just Justin knowing the show still, and I think that's something Coleman will probably learn. It's the first time it's happened. I feel like there was some times where Gus almost threw Coleman under the bus, but he just wasn't good at it. True. To where he'll learn, to where he just has to get the opportunity to do the same thing back to Justin. And because it's like you said, Kirk wants to pin them against each other. That's what the show is at times. It's matching two people. So
just like you were saying, each producer has kind of had that moment where they kind of showed they were able to go after someone. I mean, with Steve, it was the MHB Subway poem. I mean, Cullinane had a few moments where he just went after people. Justin's had the moments. Mike's had them. Everyone in the show history, except for really Gus, has had one of those moments where a gotcha moment that really shows, okay, you can go into the mud if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you guys agree with me that at some point they will lock horns and Kirk will like really kind of do his best to make some tension between them? Because to me, it feels inevitable.
Oh, it's going to happen, and I'm ready for it. I'm here for it. Let's go.
If you had to pick an A producer, like they both say co-producer, but if you had to pick who's A producer and who's B producer, not off who you would want, but like who's the alpha in that booth, who are you picking, Little People Big World guy?
I think it's Justin, just for content of the show.
It has to be.
Definitely Justin, just because this is how Kirk had it at EEI too. Curtis was the A producer, but Ken Laird pushed the buttons. It was the same kind of dynamic.
And Justin is who Kirk wanted when Dave quit, too. It was his job to lose, and he didn't try.
What do we think? He mentioned it a couple times while we're on the subject of Justin, but he had a real issue with these stairs at the BC game. He kept saying these stairs were insane. I mean, we've all been to stadiums, right? Like stadiums have some stairs, but he was talking about these stairs like he climbed Everest.
It could only be, I mean, how tall can the stadium be? It could have only been at most 10 flights of stairs.
Yeah, like BC's arena can't be that big.
I mean, could have just been Justin and Coleman commiserating. I'm not the most fit person in the world, but you get two big guys going upstairs. I'm sure they probably have some equipment. And It's not the first time a producer in KMS history has struggled with stairs, of course.
That's true.
When they couldn't handle Red 13, so.
That's true. Okay.
Tough mountain to climb those stairs.
What did we think about Julie today? I was listening. I listened to the show on YouTube. I got the first half of today's show live, second half later on, but I feel like Julie didn't say anything for the first 45 minutes. So I wasn't watching. It was just in my pocket. And then all of a sudden she starts talking. I'm like, holy shit, Julie's there? Like, she was pretty quiet for about the first half hour. Yeah. It felt like Kirk had some real animosity towards her. Like, at one point, I even wrote in my notes, oh, Kirk, like, legitimately doesn't like Julie. I think he kind of warms back up to her towards the end. What was your guys' take on Julie's performance today?
She was that close to crying, like Kirk said. That close.
Yeah. I definitely think it's tough because you can tell she loves the show, but I definitely think she's trapped in between loving the show and wanting to be part of the show and then wanting to be part of the world. So, and then Kirk thrives in the uncomfortableness. So like you said, where you could tell she wanted to cry or she was on the verge of crying, that's almost like Justin picking his face. Like Kirk's going to pick at that. He's going to eat away at it. He wants to be uncomfortable. He wants to make everyone uncomfortable.
I'll tell you what, I went to the last Sacco show, which was like kind of in the prime of Julie era. Like Julie was very prominent on the show. Everything was going well. She was, ordering people around, whatever. After the show, we had an Airbnb. A lot of people came over to. She came with her family. And it was very much like, nobody else park in the driveway because Julie needs to park there. And then she shows up with her family, cousins or whatever. And I guess I had said something on the show about dog fighting that they didn't like, and they came in and they're grilling me. I'm like, who are you guys? They're like, oh, we're Julie's cousins. We don't like you. And it ended up working out fine, but it just, I don't know. Julie is literally a female Montante. They're both degenerate alcoholics. They're both clout chasers. They go about it slightly differently, but in an alternate universe, I think they were meant to be married. So yeah, I kind of like Julie. She's a good source of Kirk gets a lot of good jokes off on her. She's just a good punching bag in that regard, and she really does love the show. Every now and then I catch myself feeling bad for her, but then I just think back to that Sacco thing, and it's like, oh yeah, make fun of her. Do you guys think she's back in the world? Did you like her? Do you like her in studio? I know right before we jumped on, David and Marilyn had an amazing tweet. It was just a compilation. It said Julie's contribution to the show, and it's just her just laughing at everything Kirk says. It's just like cut after cut of her just laughing, which really made me laugh. But yeah, I don't know. What's your stance on Julie, Blind Owl?
She's good. I like her on the show. I mean, she doesn't. It's gonna sound terrible. She doesn't contribute much, but it's sometimes that's what you need. You just need someone there to throw a comment in here or there and just kind of bounce things around. But I'm not gonna be one of these guys that just says they like her just because she's a woman. And most Minifans don't talk to women very often, so she was fine. She's fine.
Little people, big role guy.
Yeah, I don't mind her. I remember when she first came in as a third chair, and it was Dave just bringing in anyone and everyone. I was like, I thought she was the best of them.
I loved her. I thought she was great. Yeah.
As it's got on, it's got a little tiresome, but I feel like with being involved in having the relationship that she does with Kirk and being in the group chat with Dave and Justin, I think it's fun for the show. So, and she's not. I don't think she's begging to be in every month or wanting to be in every month. It's not like she's like, oh, it's Friday, it's going to be Julie. Like she's in sparring. It's not constantly. So
it's very natural when she comes into like you just said. That it's not like Steve from Gloucester begging to come in every week. She just when she's in town.
She's only joking.
Does it make you because it certainly makes me a little uncomfortable. Does it make you a little uncomfortable when she's like, oh, I had a dream I was cuddling? Like the sexual tension and just her, the strength of her attraction to Kirk makes me a little uncomfortable at times just because it's like, God, if I could listen to your inner monologue at some moments, I'm sure it would be disturbing. And I'm sure if like Kirk, even as a joke on the side, was just like texted her, was like, "Hey, I want like, you want to go get a hotel room?" Like she's like, "Yeah." Like it's just it makes me a little uncomfortable in that regard, but I also find it very amusing.
Yeah,
I don't think I would ever say that to somebody that I had that kind of dream about. I don't think I would ever say that.
It's bizarre.
I think the fact that she's like the only consistent female third chair, like female voice on the show, like, could you just imagine Stephen Gloucester was saying like, "Oh yeah, Kirk, I had a dream about you last night." Like, I would just love like.
Okay, yeah. So Julie, do you guys think she should be back in her role as dotting the I's person? Do you think she's better as kind of like this third chair that's in every now and then that Kirk kind of tortures? Yeah, I think in her heart of hearts, for me, from my perspective, I think it would be better if she just was a fan that like helped out a little bit. You know, there are fans like Nipples and those people who they kind of help out, but they're not looking for money. The fact that she is a very me person, like everything comes back to Julie.
Don't take this the wrong way. What does she do?
Not much. I think she just kind of, she's good at busy. I mean, she's very successful, I'm sure it sounds like, but it sounds like she does a lot of busy work where it's like a lot of, you know, in the corporate world, there's so many meetings and emails that don't really need to happen that happen. She kind of seems like she fills that role, you know?
There's a spot for that. I get that.
I guess there's a spot for that. She's good fodder for the show. So I just want her involved in the show in some way. It doesn't need to be in an official capacity, but I do like her hanging around every now and then. I have some random thoughts here. Feel free to chime in if you have any random thoughts. But did anybody else notice today Kirk was singing the O'Reilly Auto Parts song for Ozempic? Ozempic. But it's really O'Reilly.
He did both. I actually looked it up because I'm like, isn't that O'Reilly Auto Parts? And he did the. I've caught myself doing the same thing. Yes, O'Reilly and Ozempic are very similar but different.
They stole the jingle. God.
They didn't steal it, but it's close.
They copied it. Another random thought I had here. Are you guys music in the shower guys? Coleman was saying he's a music in the shower. His playlist was atrocious. I mean, I don't know if you're a music guys, but it's just like the greatest hits. Like, I don't know. He does not a lot of depth there, but he said he doesn't sing in the shower. Everybody sings in the shower. Am I wrong? Everybody sings. Especially if you're listening to music, you're singing in the shower, and it's exactly like Kirk says. You're imagining that you're on stage. Like everybody sings in the shower. Am I wrong?
Even if you're just humming along, you're doing something with it.
Yeah.
Coleman's playlist to me seemed like it was like a young kid who was like, "Hey, Kirk, look at my taste of music."
100%.
100%.
It's like you just listen to the classic rock station driving in.
Yeah, exactly. That you hit the nail on the head right there. Little people, big world guy.
I got a random thought for you, VD.
Hit me.
How about Gig recycling an old Jeff Foxworthy joke about Jeff Gordon?
Did he?
He did.
Enlighten me.
There's an old Jeff Foxworthy joke. Why nobody likes Jeff Gordon is because he's too personable. He said the same thing on today's show.
Wow, we got a joke thief. Just like Red. So we had Red stealing from Chappelle, and now we got Gig stealing from Jeff Foxworthy.
I think it says more about me that I knew it the second he said it, but
absolutely does. I have no idea who Jeff Foxworthy is. No idea.
Oh, come on, Blue Collar Comedy Tour. They were
okay. If I look at his face,
you'll know exactly. You'll know.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know that guy.
Are you smiling, fifth grader?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, what did you think about? I don't know. Any other random thoughts? I've kind of hit on our big topics here, but I do have some other off the record things we can get to. But any final KMS thoughts? Anything that stuck out to you this week that you think is worthy of bringing up on this program?
With the Super Bowl coming up, Gus made probably one of the single dumbest things I've ever heard come out of someone's mouth, where he said the players should be allowed to gamble on themselves.
Yeah, so dumb.
It was the worst thing I think I've ever heard anyone say.
You know,
and
go ahead.
He was like so confident. And he was like, "Yeah, Jared Goff's betting his buddies like $50
$20
for 350 yards."
Said that when when they were introducing that, he's like, "Oh yeah, I overheard that players aren't allowed in casinos." It's like, what do you mean you overheard that? Like, no, you didn't overhear that. You heard it on Part of My Take where they talked about it, or you heard it somewhere. You didn't like. What do you mean you overheard it? Like you were just standing around somewhere and you heard people talking about it? He's just an interesting
Standing at the
guy.
bus station, listening to folks talk about what NFL players can do.
Yeah. Yeah, Gus. I mean, yeah. To me, of course, players can't gamble because I've always thought about this too. Because I used to say, "Oh yeah, you should be able to bet on yourself," but then it's like, if you don't bet on yourself, then you're kind of leaving that gray area of like, oh, well, this guy normally bets on himself. Why isn't he? And it's all this gray area.
Yeah, he's not in the game plan this week.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is the rundown, right? Are we going to start go on a 20-minute rant about terrible rappers? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, we got to do something like it. But I do want to get, unless anybody has any other show takes, I do have a little Minifan drama that I'm involved in that I want to bring to the court of public opinion. But any takes before we dive into the deep end here?
Well, if we're going to talk rundown, we've talked about it a little bit to start, but the rundown's back, and I actually think it's been good. I do think the only reason the rundown is back is because VD said he was bringing the rundown back.
100%.
So Ziggy and Red had to get together, and they had to get back before it did. So I want to thank you, VD, for bringing back the rundown and bringing entertainment to the network.
Of course. No, I'm glad it is back. If it had to be me pressing forward to get it back, hopefully now they won't even take weeks off too. Because if they do, I'm just going to jump in and steal the show. So there should be some type of show like that is well done, where it wraps up the week in KMS, and it doesn't need to be Stevie Bits talking about his wars with people. And I like Mike and the Minifans. I think they do a great job with that. But to me, that's more the show of where they like interview people that were just on the show. It's kind of like the breaking news, whereas I think the rundown should be like 3 people kind of just talking about what they heard, like not the people who were just in or whatever. I kind of like that aspect of it. Okay, let's get in. Drama. Okay, so I will introduce this as Davergate, and it re-engaged in my mind today when Kirk said he might buy a Papagino's and have Daver from Hull run it. Listen, disclaimer: I like Daver a lot. He's a good guy. I've just had a few experiences with him recently.
Oh boy.
All involving financial things. So the moral of the story here, I'll get ahead of it. It's just Daver, a little dodgy with money. Okay, so we have the Big Dog Gambling Show. Me, Daver, one of Daver's friends. Every week we take our favorite lock of the week. We put it together for a 3-team parlay. Daver's in the legal gambling state, so we send Daver the money. He puts the bet in. He sends the screenshot every time of the bet so we can tweet it out. So going into last week or 2 weeks ago, we do the same normal thing. We send Daver our bets. We send the money, except this time he didn't send a screenshot of the bet. He sent a screenshot of like right before you enter the bet, so it's still like you haven't clicked submit. Right away, my antennas go up. I happen to know that he had been pulling a Montante and asking some other people for loans. So I knew there was something dodgy going on. The instant I saw it, I texted him. I'm like, Daver, did you really put this bet in? Or are you just hoping that it loses and you're going to take the money? So if I was just sending Daver money for a random bet, and I'm like, hey, I want you to put this bet in for me, and he wants to play the role of Vegas, where he doesn't actually put the bet in and he's banking on me losing, which I do more often than not, I'm totally fine with that. But the difference here is this was a parlay where we're all supposed to give one leg. We're all supposed to be cheering for it to win. And even if he does genuinely give a pick that he wants to win, knowing that if he didn't actually put the bet in and it loses, he's making $60 off it. It just throws off the balance of the bet. It throws off the universe, the karma, and everything. So right away, I kind of called him out. I'm like, Daver, did you put that bet in, or are you just kind of secretly hoping we lose? No response. Games go on. I ask him again later. I'm like, Daver, I I really have a bad feeling that you didn't actually put this bet in and that you're kind of secretly have an incentive for it to lose. He's like, oh, no, I would never do that. I would never do that. I'm like, okay, whatever. His buddy, too, is like, oh, no, he wouldn't do that. It gets to the next morning. I've slept on it. I'm like, you know what? I just got a bad feeling about this, and I don't want to have this feeling about one of my friends. So I'm like, David, I don't know if you did it or not, but I just don't like having this uncertainty. Can you just send me the bet slip? Send me the receipt that shows that you put the bet in, and just please put this anxiety to rest for me.
Easy enough?
Kind of easy enough, right? I'm like, hey, look, if I'm the asshole, I'm sorry, but just I'm giving you an opportunity right now to kind of shove it in my face. Like, oh, VD, you asshole, here's a bet slip. How dare you ever question me? He does the opposite. He digs his heels in. No, if you're demanding the bet slip, I'm not showing it to you. Instantly,
classic,
I'm like, okay.
Classic defensive behavior.
It wasn't put in.
Exactly. And I had been talking to other people on the side. I'm like, oh, God, I think this is his response is going to be just dig his heels in and say, oh, I'm not going to do it if you demand it. We go back and forth for a day or two. And I'm just like, dude, like, there's no need for this. If you didn't put it in, just tell me. I won't be mad. But I just don't want to be lied to or like taken as a fool. Because more background to it, the week before, we had hit the bet. And so he owed me and the other guy about $120, say. Sure. No big deal. I'm not in a rush for the money, but it's like 3 days go by, 5 days go by. His buddy's eventually like, hey, when's that money coming? He's like, oh, I'll cash it out. It hasn't hit my account yet. Like a week goes by. I mean, we all live in 2024. Money goes to your account instantly. This isn't like the 1980s where
at most it's a couple of days.
At most it's a couple of days. So a couple more days go by. It's been over a week now. His friend says again, hey, David, what's up with that money? He goes, I lost my debit card and I had to re-up. Yeah, I had to re-upload a new card, so it delayed the money, but it's coming. I'm getting it to you. So this is all happening at the same time as I'm worried about this bet not actually being placed. Long story short, he has dug his heels in. He has said, I will never show you the bet slip, but I absolutely placed it. And I don't even care about the money getting paid late. But I'm like, dude, that debit card story is bullshit. Like, just tell me. Nope, debit card story is true. He put the bet in. I'm the asshole for making the accusation. If I put myself in his shoes and somebody is accusing me of this, I am taking that screenshot so quickly and I am sending it to them and being like, look at you, asshole. You were wrong. How dare you ever think of me? I'm not digging my heels in deeper and deeper. So I just need to put this into the court of public opinion. I want to get both your guys' take. Am I being an asshole for making the accusation, or is there smoke here?
You're 100% in the right. And let me just say this. Two people who have gone at me for not being a quote-unquote real gambler for making these picks every week on my website, and both of them are borrowing money for people to make bets.
David Montante.
Yes, those two have gone at me, and they're both borrowing money, and now they're both doing shady shit, trying to weasel their way out of paying bets and taking money from people who are just trying to have fun. It says a lot. It says a lot.
So did you pay him for the next bet before you got paid out?
Absolutely.
You're the asshole.
And in the meantime, he's posting about parlays he's hit where he's winning hundreds of dollars. It's not a question of like, is the money there? He's still posting other bets he's making while he owes me and the other guy money. Somehow the debit card didn't affect this. I won't even get into the history, but like a year ago, I will get into it because it's
you're getting into it.
No, I'm into this. I'm awake
so like maybe a year or two ago, I get a text from Daver and he's like, listen, I'm going to my buddy's bachelor party, our mutual buddy, Phil, a guy I grew up with. And he sends me a screenshot of his bank thing where he's like, I have $500 hitting my account, but it just hasn't hit yet. I don't want to be short on money for this bachelor party. Could you lend me $500 and I'll pay you back on Monday or on Friday, whatever it was, within a few days. I'm like, you know what, David, no problem. I want you to have fun at this bachelor party. Send him the money. Nothing. Week goes by, nothing. Now, I am intentionally not asking him for this money because I wanted to see how long he would go. It must have taken me 2 months to get this money back. And in the meantime, he's posting, I'm hitting bets. I'm doing this. later on, this wasn't at the same time, but later on he goes on Kirk and he's like, oh yeah, I'm making $80,000 a year, bragging about his money. So there's just David is a great guy. When I went to Saco, stayed at his sister's house, picked me up at the airport, cares about you, good guy. But when it comes to money, there's just something fishy going on there. So I would just say to Kirk, don't let David run your Papagenos. Because it's a headache.
If he did, it would be over in 6 months anyway. He doesn't stick to anything. So
6 months. I give it 6 weeks. That he'd be cooking the books for sure. So it makes me good to Blind Owl. You gave your opinion. Little People, Big World guy. I'm not crazy, right? I'm not, and I'm not even mad at him. It does put a little like blemish on like kind of what I think about somebody. Because listen, I got no problem with you taking a long time to pay me back or being like, yeah, you know what, I fucked up, but don't treat me like I'm some dummy who's supposed to believe these debit card and the money in the account and the fake bet slip. It's just too much for me.
I mean, you are a dummy because you paid for the other bet without getting paid out. You're a dummy for that, 100%.
Absolutely. Fair.
But when there's smoke, there is fire, 100%.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. It makes me feel good about myself because, every now and then I second guess myself.
First instinct is usually correct.
Where there's smoke, there usually is fire. All right, fellas, any last takes before we get out of here? I want to thank you both for joining me, staying up late on the East Coast here. I had a pleasure recording this great show with you. I hope this doesn't cause too much controversy with the other Rundown guys because I really hate controversy. I want everybody to get along.
Peace and love on the network, right, Steve? Steve from Gloucester.
Yeah, peace and love.
All good.
All right, fellas. Thank you. I don't know when we'll be back. If we'll be back, we'll kind of see how this sorts out with everything. But once again, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. Everybody watching, thank you. And have a great rest of your evening. God bless.